One of the questions that I had, and one of the questions I had for Glenn was, when growing an empire, tell me a little bit about some of the challenge and learning lessons that we've encountered growing from brand new, you're coming up with the concept, to nearly 90,000 agents today.
Yeah, well, great question. Thanks, Thomas, for having me. Yeah, good to be here. There's every size of an organization has different challenges. Obviously, most of us started as individual producers. In some cases, you started on a team, and then you graduated to actually being an individual producer, and then maybe you were a glutton for punishment, and then you decided, hey, I'm going to start a team, and then you go through sort of whatever those learnings are. And then in my case, I went from team to running multiple teams, and then I decided, well, I need to start a brokerage. And so this is the standard career path, obviously, that agents think about, right? It's like you start a team, or you become an agent, you start a team, then what do I do after this? Well, you start a brokerage, buy a franchise, buy a bunch of offices, and then you sort of kind of run in, you figure out what you figure out, which is that most of those, outside of being an individual agent, were probably not financially the right thing to do. I would say that if an agent really wanted to make money, they would not run a team. They would just be an individual producer. But that doesn't stroke our ego well enough. And so we decide, hey, we're going to go and start a team, because that's what gives us sort of more value in the marketplace. So we go through all those lessons, and then you come up to, okay, you've learned what you've learned, and 2008, 2009 came along for us, and so I'd done all the above up until that point in time. And what 2009 gave us was a blank sheet of paper, and there was a lot of value, because at the time, we knew what we were doing wasn't really that great. Took a lot of hands-on effort. It's hard to find talent to sort of come and help us grow what we were growing. Yeah, maybe we could have figured it out. But what 2009 said is, if we were to build the real estate brokers of the future, the one that I would hang my license at, which didn't exist in 2009, what would it need to have in it? And so you build that piece, you sort of you ideate, and you kind of solve all the various challenges that sort of the model, we'll just say. And then you're out there, obviously, pitching it to both staff and agents, and doing the sort of the early growth phases, but still fairly small. But eventually you start to add staff. I think by 2015 or 16, we had 100 or so staff. We passed our first 1,000 agents, and then we fought. Probably one of my biggest battles was 2016 or 2017. I sort of fought a bit of a hostile takeover of the company, just an internal thing, but it was very stressful. So there's that piece. If you do something that's really impactful, then people are going to, at some level, try to take advantage of it in an early stage, when it becomes obvious that it's going to grow into something. But then finding the right talent that are real true partners. I mean, that's part of the whole growing an empire, and then making sure that you get the incentives right. You just like trying to figure out, how do we attract the best agents to eXp, and what would the model need to be for me as an agent to want to be at eXp. We have to do the same thing on the talent side. Like, we have to think about the staff and the people that are part of it. How do we find those people, and how do we create the right incentives, and how do we make sure that we have the alignment around that? So I think the key is always be learning, always be willing to learn, and always be willing to be sort of out front as much as possible, because that ultimately is a super important piece of it. So I'd say that from a biggest lesson is I think you're always going to be learning something new, and you always got to be open to new ideas, and um, and you have to be willing to take steps back in order to actually take steps forward as well.
Lots of risk too.
Oh yeah, well, ton of risk, but I would rather be a broke entrepreneur personally and this is me. I've got warped wiring, but I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and so EXP was starting EXP and growing EXP was not so much about. There was a financial component to it, but it would have been safer and more predictable to pursue a different route, because EXP could have failed miserably. It's a new concept. It had never been done before, and but I would rather have tried the science experiment and look back and know that I tried it, even if it didn't work, than to not try it, and play the safe
Yeah.
route.
We know everything rises and falls on leadership, and in leadership, it's one of the most rewarding, but most of the time it becomes a very challenging part too, because we know that no one succeeds alone. And who's been the biggest supporters of Glenn and that talent area that's been a big increment part of the success of the vision of Glenn and EXP?
Yeah, I mean, early days, there was different people at different times. I mean, I started my real estate teams in 2004, and I still have people today with with me and EXP that were there back in those early days. Um, but in EXP, I'd say the first significant um, higher partnership relationship was when we opened up the New England states, and Jason Gessing joined us back in 2010. And so that was, we'd launched in October of 2009. But by, I think, about February, March 2010, Jason joined us and helped. He was the broker of record, and then he also had a legal background, and he just jumped in and did a bunch of everything. There's other people who are no longer with us, but still were super instrumental in the growth of EXP. I hired a guy back in 2006, a guy named Gabe LeBeau, and he was with me all the way through about 2018, 19. Um, and he was the head of marketing, and there literally was nothing that I couldn't ask of him that he wouldn't work on, obsess with, and ultimately at a fairly young age, in mid 30s, he was maybe late 30s, he was able to retire entirely because of his involvement in EXP. And so there's been a number of people along the way, but I would say those are a couple of key people that were pretty important to getting us to where we are. Now we've got an entirely amazing. We put an announcement today about some of the people that are in different roles. We've got somebody starting on Monday. Renee Casper is going to be joining us on the chief HRO role. Obviously got Leo Perea as our chief strategy officer. We got Seth Siegler is going on chief innovation officer, and we're making changes all the time. But it's finding the right people that at the right time. Some people are going to be there for a season. Some people are going to be there for years, and some people are there for the lifetime. And a lot of times you don't know who's who until you sort of get down the road a bit.
Yeah, I'll tell you, what an amazing job Leo did last week for us in the announcement, and his leadership was just extraordinary, and showing with confidence and sternness, and we're heading in the right direction, and that kind of goes into the vision moving forward with great leadership. What does that look like, Glenn, moving forward? Because how we got to where we are isn't where we're going to get to with the same possibly
Yeah,
leadership.
it's kind of an interesting time. You know, for the longest time, I mean, first of all, everybody's heard me say very complimentary things about Keller Williams and Gary Keller and those types of things. But it was also kind of a cool thing to have kind of this quote unquote enemy who didn't like you and would say bad things about you. You know, Gary couldn't help himself for a number of years. I want the old Gary back. You know, I'm just saying, you know, when he was talking smack about eXp, it actually was a really good rallying cry for everybody. So, you know, if we can get Gary to talk smack about us, let me know. But right now, you know, we're now the largest single real estate brokerage in the U.S. We're now the, you know, we're you know, we just had the stats come out last week in Real Trends. I think we've got some other stuff coming out from some other organizations, and you know, just the fact that we've sort of really knocked out of the park. So one of the things that we're thinking about from a leadership perspective is what's our next rallying cry? What's our, you know, we're navigating some tough stuff at the moment, just the commission lawsuit stuff, and you know, NAR in their infinite wisdom decided to throw the industry under the bus. But I think after a week or so, I think that a lot of people, I don't know what your take is on this, Thomas, but I think a lot of people are going, okay, now we're just going to negotiate differently. Still going to be, commission is still going to be in the transaction. It's just a definitional thing. Who's paying it, but it comes out of the deal. It's still going to get, the mortgage is still going to be there. All the other pieces to the puzzle are going to still be there. And it just introduces a new conversation that we've not had before, which is that the conversation at the front end and just say, hey, I'm, obviously, you know, like and trust me. And that's why we're sitting together. I know the inventory, I know this, I know that. I'm here to support you for the next 60, 90, 120 days and beyond in this real estate transaction, which can be fairly stressful. And I charge X. And if you're good with that, let's go look at properties. I think that's about as simple as it gets. It's like, it's going to be, and by the way, it's going to get into it's going to be in the transaction just like it was before. It's just packaged up differently at closing. And, and so, you know, I've kind of come away with the, you know, after sitting with it for, what's it been, a week and a half or so since that came out, and going, it's not going to be that bad. It's actually, it's in some respects, I actually think there's going to be some agents that work with buyers who actually fundamentally will get a raise, because they'll be able to, let's just pick a number, but let's just say it's 3%. They're just going to say, I charge 3%. Where there may have been having to deal with listings that were 2%, 2.5%, or whatever, and they're going to be busy enough that they'll just work with the buyers that are willing to agree to that, and that still gets packaged up in the deal just like it always did, and they'll actually make more money than they did when they were just working with what was just published in the MLS. So I think it can be a positive thing for those who are true professionals of their craft.
Yeah. You know, after hearing Leo speak, which was absolutely amazing, by the way, and giving us some guidance based on what we already have knowledge of. And I think you are absolutely correct. It's going to be a positive thing because the buyer cannot see homes without a buyer representation in place nationally, right? So they're going to get educated a whole lot faster. So we really don't have to educate them as much when we're meeting them because they're already hearing some of the stuff that's going to happen. Now, moving forward through all the NAR stuff, and obviously this is probably the biggest topic in the real estate industry today. How prepared are we to get through this with the information side? Because I know a lot of brokers, and Leo mentioned this, and I'm getting it myself from a lot of independent brokers, even some name brokerages out there that are not talking about it with their agents because they just don't want to, I don't know what it is, but being informative and preparing is probably the best opportunity for what we're coming through. How are we prepared to go through that with Brian Ellington and Leo and our leadership?
Yeah, in fact, you know, Brian Ellington has already released a new course, which is free to obviously all of us, but it's on the buyer representation, and you can actually go and, you know, do his class that he's done on the buyer rep side of things. But we're producing a lot of content. We're obviously having conversations, but there's a lot of, there is a, if you're not, I don't want to say savvy, but if you haven't been around business long enough, then you become nervous of the things that you don't have an understanding of. And so you look at the fact that we now have been and continue to be the most vocally supportive brand for the agent to talk about these tough subjects, more so than anybody else that I'm aware of. And somebody, if let me know if you see it differently. But the reason is one, we know we can talk about it. Two, by the way, we haven't settled anything with the Plaintiffs' Council. We're named to 11 different commission lawsuits, but there's a reasonable conversation that you can have that doesn't put you in harm's way. So if I came out and said that I'm going to go visit with every single real estate brand out there, I'm going to get with their CEOs, and we're going to figure out what we're going to do in the future, that's going to get me in trouble. I'm going to go to jail. But if it's talking about how do we navigate as true professionals in the industry, and how do we have conversations with our clients, and how do we talk about this new normal, those conversations should be taking place. But I do know, and I've heard this as well, that most of the major brands have not even done that with their agents yet.
Yeah, that's kind of, we rely on our leadership to help guide us, right? Like navigating and turning the ship in the right direction. And if they're not prepared for it, how can we be prepared for it? George, I see that you have your hand up. Go ahead, bud.
Hey, Glenn, good to see you again. I think it's kind of important. There's a lot of us that probably don't understand the dynamic of Brian Ellington. We brought his name up, but this is our Chief Learning Officer, Glenn. You know him better than I do. I know him, and a lot of us do from reputation. He is literally one of the best in the entire world at educationals and systems and strategies and tools. Can we give a little more depth to this amazing business partner that we all have?
Yeah. So I had the fortunate opportunity to engage with Brian Ellington starting in about 2005 to about 2007. And at the time I was at KW, 2004, I was there. I joined the agent, the technology council for Keller Williams International. So I was going to Austin fairly regularly to quote unquote advise. By the way, Keller took none of my advice, but I was there to advise the team around technology and things to think about relative to technology. All it was a presentation to us to hopefully get our buy-in so we could say we love it. But in that, I was also part of the Internet Lead Generation Mastermind that was held. There was one in 2005 and one in 2006. And these were the top internet lead gen folks in the industry, not just isolated to Keller. And I was one of the top guys in that group of people in the room. I was actually one of the probably the top 3 people in that group in terms of internet lead gen. And in there, Brian Ellington was, he and I started to form a relationship. He was the chief learning officer at Keller Williams at the time. And so he and I really got to know each other quite well, and I loved what he was doing, and the content that came out of KW and all the training manuals, all the training materials, that was all pretty much underneath Brian Ellington's domain. And then he went on to do some other things, including being the chief operating officer of Century 21, international, working underneath the Realty brands, and also was the chief learning officer there for a period of time. But he comes with a really deep understanding of organized real estate, sales skills, training, lead gen, scaling systems, scaling models, scaling teams, and then teaching that and organizing it in a way that's actionable. So he's heading up, both the learning side, internal coaching and training division, and a number of other sort of elements that are pretty necessary for a enterprise scaled organization. We kind of obviously scaled in some respects as the anti-Keller model, in that it was very, very much agents can build whatever types of businesses they wanted to build. Now, building more, not one standard, but more standardized systems and models and training. That's where Brian Ellington is going to help us quite a bit. And we bought a lot of really cool stuff over the years. I mean, obviously we bought Success Magazine. So Amy Somerville, who headed up, she was the VP of professional development at Remax. She had actually pretty significant connection to the Success brand when she was there. So her and Brian are kind of working hand in hand on a number of different things as well. But Brian comes with, pretty much the best of what in this industry could hope for.
So basically, what I'm hearing is we're pretty much fly by night. We don't have the incredible skills at the highest level. And I have to say this, Debbie Weller put a comment in here. The leadership team you built, Glenn, is top notch. Thank you. Impressive C-suite. Leo's kind of, he's a dime a dozen. Your entire surrounding executive board is just kind of fly by night. And I'm being completely sarcastic.
Right.
Thank you for putting together such a strong team to help navigate this. Not going to use the word ship today. Our course straightly. Thank you,
Yeah.
Tom. Turn it back to you.
No, it's what I focus more time on is figuring out who else can we attract to be part of this this team, and you don't get on this team easily. Like this is like to be in the top tier of eXp. Now, keep in mind this is a far cry from where we were in 2009, 2010. I mean, it was, in order to bring these people over, you have to provide the financial incentives that align with where they want to go as human beings. And they're very ambitious people. I mean, some of these were running, Leo was ran the number one team at Keller Williams for a few years back in 2012. And so you look at the talent that we're bringing in. I mean, we have more people in the C-suite of this company, that have actively sold at a high level real estate than virtually any other brand that's out there.
Glenn, thank you for sharing that, because so many on the call that are here, probably, even though they're with us and been with us a year, 2 years, even 3 years, probably have no idea the talent behind Brian and the talent behind Leo and the resources that we're having within this company that so many of us are probably not even utilizing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and we're all pretty accessible. I mean, I don't know how many messages you had to send to me to get my attention, but you knew how to track me down. You know how to ping me on Workplace, and we're all very accessible. I mean, Michael Valdez, Carolyn Merchant, Jim Bramble, Olivia Curley. I mean, we've got such, and then all the state managing brokers and all of the. I mean, we've got so many people that are. I mean, they live, eat, and breathe. This model, and one of the things I think it kind of goes back to a couple of the questions that you had. But in order to grow a business, to create an empire, so to speak, the mission cannot be what every other company's mission is. Most companies' missions are, why are they in business? They're in business to make money. And if that's the mission, nobody's going to join that mission. Like nobody says how, literally, I mean, like even I don't do this. Like nobody says, how do I make Glenn more money? Like that's not the mission. The mission is, how do we enhance agents' lives, and how do we make decisions that ultimately enhance their lives? And if we do it right, and we continue to execute properly, then over the long haul, and when I say the long haul, I'm talking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, not next quarter, next year. I'm talking multiple years out. Then there will certainly be a financial reward that's associated with it, but it's not about quote unquote making money. It's about changing the lives of hundreds of thousands of real estate professionals around the world, if not a million real estate agents. And that for me is the most meaningful part of this whole exercise. And with that, people are willing to sign up to follow that. Now I mentioned the incentives, but without the alignment of a true mission driven company, along with the ability to help people achieve the goals that they have important for their personal lives, those two things together, that's what takes a company where it's going.
I love it. Rich, go ahead, bud.
Two questions in a statement, Glenn, if you could. Rich Gann here in Cleveland, Ohio. I think we could all agree that over the last 14 days, the job Leo has done in delivering the voices that we needed to hear have been tremendous. Question one: Where do you see Leo going with our company in the future?
I'll leave that one to the side for a little bit.
Sure.
But he's not going anywhere.
Well,
but I don't want to ruin
I think
anything
it's a good thing
that
he's
may or
not
may
going
not happen in the future.
Second question, and this is been with the company going on 7 months, formerly KW. One thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of noise coming from competition that have created iterations of what you've created, talking about some of the deficit that they see in terms of organization within the company. Can you talk to the vision that you set out to, and why we have different leaders running different things within our organization?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to sort of think about. One, we're somewhat of a victim of our own success, meaning that when and I so right now I think we had early on I talked about the fact that we had KW out there sort of talking smack about eXp, and that became kind of a cool rallying cry for us, is that it's on like Donkey Kong, all the stuff that went along with that. We literally dominated social media. We could do it today. Like literally everybody here could be sort of, if they're not already doing it, we could be just blowing up the social media side of things. But because we've got so large, a lot of people have actually stepped back from sort of being as visible. Even, some folks have, some of them have fairly large organizations in eXp. And so I think what we've got is we're kind of in this transition phase where the next group of leaders is emerging inside of eXp, and they're going to be the visible faces of eXp. I think what I would encourage anybody to do is, one, people follow leaders, and where we've kind of stepped back, and this is why Leo was so awesome last week, is he reestablished our leadership position visibly with the industry. I mean, we had over 90,000 people watched his video, 50,000 live at its peak. I mean, it pretty much sort of dominated the airwaves. And if you looked at our competition, there were all, like I'm talking about the smaller copycat companies, they almost had nobody sort of watching their stuff, because we're the thought leaders in the space. And so I think there's in terms of the quote unquote, Leo's working on a lot of that same stuff, where we're trying to get more of the quote unquote playbooks opened up to everybody. Some people are somewhat resistant to it because they're saying that was their secret sauce, they grew the company. But nobody talked about that piece 5 years ago, even though same people, but we were 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 agents at the time, so much smaller. But I think there's just people will pick on stuff because we're now the dominant player. We're now the company that they're sort of going, well, we want, and we all have this tendency. We all want to sort of take down the big guy. We're now the big guy, and so they're going to find quote unquote faults with us. But I don't see them as being that. I don't see us as being a flawed organization. But we do have things up our sleeves of things that we're going to do that's going to help continue sort of the growth alignment piece of eXp. But we just went through a little bit of a transition. 2020 was the first year, and much to my chagrin, I'd sat down with Tamer Pulley maybe a year before that and told him his current rev share program at the time sucked, and then he decided to virtually copy our model verbatim. So anyway, it's interesting to just see how all that sort of shook out, because now without Real's now what, 15,000 agents or something like that, and some of that's because they literally copied the model that they were doing 1 year rev share, and the rev share go away. I'm going, that's like, who's going to join that? And he kind of wanted us to buy his company at one point, and now looking back, I should have.
Great. Awesome. And sidetracking Leo, just my opinion, amazing guy. He's someone I've known through previous industry as well. Not industry, but previous company. Same thing with Brian Ellington. So bringing in these great leaders with this great talent is setting us up for success. We just need to plug into the systems and the tools much better on our end. So, I kind of covered a lot of the questions that we envision. I know the biggest thing is the NAR settlement. I know that we're prepared, our agents, as soon as the new releases of everything that comes out. Leo is informing us, eXp is informing us, and preparing us for what will happen, right? So better preparing us gives us the best opportunity. Understanding that there's some great things coming in the works too is also exciting to prepare us to grow a greater business. George, is there any questions in the chat that I wasn't following that?
I've got
really
Tom.
something
We've gone through
we want
a
to open
lot
it
of
up.
them.
Glenn, how much time do you have first? I want to be very cautious of your time.
I've got about 10-15 more minutes. I can
Okay.
kind of hang with you guys.
Okay, perfect.
One of the ones that comes up, Glenn, and first off, again, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate this. Having seen both models, you've got what I call a platform model, which is eXp and some of our lesser known copycats. And you also have the traditional model. You have an insight that's pretty unique that we don't necessarily have. My vision is that the traditional model will not be able to be long-term sustainable at the level it used to be, competing against a platform model because of agility and probably some things that I'm unaware of. Do you find that there's the possibility that the traditional model may suffer down the road based on platforms?
Oh yeah. I think the traditional model is done. Like they're just dying a very slow death. It's a bit.
Me too. I didn't want to say it that brutally, but yeah, I agree with you. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically death by 1,000 cuts. One, they're stuck with their models. So when I think about traditional models, I'm thinking specifically franchise systems. Franchise systems have literally no ability to pivot, and that's because when you file a franchise document with the FTC and the Federal Trade Commission, part of in order to sell a franchise, part of your obligation as a franchisor is to defend the model that they sell to franchisees and to basically not create disparities between the offerings. So you wouldn't want McDonald's to come in and you buy a McDonald's and then somebody puts it in a food truck and then can literally sit outside your door and sell the same McDonald's hamburger for 25 or 30% less. So they basically have to say, if you want to McDonald's, this is exactly what your McDonald's needs to do. This is how it operates, and we're going to support that, and we can't compete against it. So Keller has, a bunch of us have been there in the past. Gary has tried multiple times to launch his virtual market center model. I mean, if anybody's been around Keller for more than 6 or 7 years, has heard this thing where he's tried to do the virtual market center, and he gets shut down. he gets hit with basically cease and desists. He gets hit with the potential of lawsuits. And so he gets stopped dead in his tracks attempting to do the virtual market center. Same, Remax can't do it. Any of the Anywhere brands can't do it. Could Anywhere probably has more latitude because they're a holding company of a number of different real estate brands. Could they come up with another brand that was a cloud-based model? Potentially. But would it cannibalize all of the other brands? And then they would be sort of stuck in between a rock and a hard place as well.
I think they tried that with C21.
Well, they did it with Coldwell Banker Blue at one time, so that was another one.
Right.
And Coldwell Banker franchisees cried foul, and so they had to shut down Coldwell Banker Blue. So it's just not, and they can't really change the economics much because they would basically be hurting all their other brands if they did. So really what we've got is this new group of brokerages that are going to show up, and within 10 years, so it's 2024 now, by 2034, 70% of the industry works in a cloud-based brokerage, 30% are traditional, and a lot of those traditional will be based, in my opinion, around very specific niches. It's like a high-end storefront in Beverly Hills, a beachfront, lots of tourist traffic walking past stuff. But like, there's going to be specific stuff that needs that bricks and mortar piece, but 70% of the industry will be working for a platform. I think even though Compass is technically able to make more pivots than most, they're sort of almost doubling down on their bricks and mortar and sort of that side of the business. So I see Compass, maybe because they've had more access to money than anybody else, sort of continuing to maintain some presence. But all the rest of them, I think they're pretty much going to go away.
Okay. And I seem to think the same. I'm a business person that happens to be in real estate. So it's really nice to hear that, because you've got a bigger view than most of us do. And I have to put this in as my own, because I've had conversations back and forth with Brian Ellington, and to have somebody like him at the head of our learning, and all of a sudden the brick and mortar that everybody we grew up with. What I want more than anything is I want knowledge that's going to impact my business long term, and I love that you're leaning in that direction. I've got 2 more questions, and then I'll turn it back over to Tom. One of our partners, Olivia, asked a question and said, "What do you think?" And it's 2-part on this one. What do you think of all the other brokerages working or creating similar eXp models? I want to adopt that question a little bit and say we've got a lot of copycats out there that are, really all platform based, and we're obviously leading this. Are we learning from some adjustments that they've made to your original model? And is there a potential for us to kind of beat them at their own game? Because they're taking your model, they say, how can we tweak it? Are we in a learning based mode based on what they're showing us? Or do you feel comfortable with where we're at?
Yeah, no, we're definitely learning. We've got some ideas of some things that we want to do. By the way, change of any sort is never easy. So, but will, is necessary. And so I think you're going to see us practicing some agility in the next couple months on some stuff that we've learned in what's going on out there. But there's going to be this big, I've stated it, and I still think it's a very accurate statement, be huge competition for second place. Like literally, they're as long as we do the right thing. One of the things that we do, and it came out in the Mike Del Prete article. Did you guys see that one that came out here just recently?
No, sir.
About the profitability of real estate brokerages.
It was a phenomenal article.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, find the link. Maybe put it in the chat here. But take a look at that. We are the only company of any substantial size that, and certainly even our copycat competitors, we're the only company that is basically running a profitable real estate brokerage model. and and you can run a unprofitable model and lose money hand over fist. I mean, Compass obviously has done it. You can do it when money is essentially free, but you can't do it when money is expensive. And money is getting expensive. Like money, if you want to borrow money commercially, you're at 6, 7, 8% minimum, and probably closer to 10%. And then you have to borrow money to pay the next person in. What's the definition of a Ponzi scheme is kind of a basic question. The definition of a Ponzi scheme is when you take money from old investors or take money from new investors, give it to old investors, and say it came from the profits of the business. And if you think about it, if you actually dive into the financials of some of these companies, that's virtually exactly what they're doing. We're taking money in some cases from the agents. They're taking new money from the agents, and then they're using it to prop up a financial system that actually doesn't work or doesn't pencil. And then they're saying, well, we're adjusted EBITDA profitable. Well, they're only adjusted EBITDA profitable because they took $40 million from their agents and propped up their financial statements in order to ultimately kind of get that quote unquote profitability piece. And that's, I'm calling it a Ponzi scheme because that's effectively what it is.
Appreciate that. I've got one more, and then I'll turn it back over to Tom based on the time frame we have. So this is being recorded, but we're not going to share it with anybody. What can you tell us that's coming down the pike that nobody else knows that you've got up your sleeve? Because we're standing with you, brother. What do you got for us? You got anything? Any good news?
Yeah, this is not good. This is not getting broadcast to the workplace, and
all
it's
over
not,
the place, right?
Nobody's potentially taking screenshots and or recording.
No. Well, maybe a little bit. But what do you got? What's some news that we don't know that you can share with us, sir?
Yeah, I'm really excited about a new hire that we're going to likely announce in May. Super excited about that. Let's see. We're in the middle of a CFO search. Everybody probably knows that. Talked to some really amazing people in that search. So I'm excited about them bringing some really strategic elements to the company. I mean, we're 5.5 years ago was when Jeff Whiteside had joined, and we were less than 20,000 agents at the time, and now we're almost 80,000. Totally different company. And some of the folks we're talking to is going to add some really major strategic opportunities for us, including things like I believe that partnerships with some major tech companies would be something that I think is going to be in the works in the not too distant future. Thinking about the opportunity for massive lead gen at an incredible scale. So those are some things those are some things we're working on. None of it's a given at all, but those are the types of things I'm working on. And but we got stuff coming. Yeah, but I'm not going to tip my hand too much.
Fair enough.
Nice.
We had one of our partners, Tom, if you don't mind. Daryl just asked us, how do you foresee the NAR settlement impacting the rental market and transactions? And I don't have an answer on that.
I don't think it affects the rental market. Well, I'd love to kind of hear why that question, because I don't think at least on the surface, I don't see it affecting the rental market. And impacting transactions, like the number of transactions. I think the number of transactions generally is going to be the same. The question really is around, is there a place where we'll call it a discount brokerage gets traction in the marketplace? And so that's about where I see it, is like in a new marketplace. Does Redfin get market share? Like Redfin for years, and this is why I actually think that things don't really change. If consumers were commission sensitive, then they would have gravitated like en masse to Redfin. I mean, they're giving back 50% of the buyer side commission. They were listing for 1%. And yet, at the end of the day, when you look at it, they got to a whopping 5% of the market in Seattle, their home city where they started, and they've been in for 17, 18 years. They got to a whopping 5%. So consumers are not as commission sensitive as as some of the pundits in the industry have made them out to be.
Nice. Well, Glenn, I know that you're thank you for your generosity of your time and sharing. And I know there was some things that you couldn't really go into 100% detail. I think this kind of gives us a great understanding that there's so many great things in the work that's coming up here soon to better our company, to better the agent. With Brian Ellington and Leo and the few other things that are in place, really is an opportunity for us to go, wow, we have some awesome support. So I want to thank you for your time here and appreciate you coming in.
Awesome. Hey, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
All right. See you.
Chat soon. Okay. Bye.
Guys, I just want to thank everyone for joining in on the call and the questions that were up. If you didn't have an opportunity to ask a question, I will tell you that I am bold enough to send anyone in the company a message through workplace chat, and so should you. Brian Ellington, Chief Learning Officer, amazing. Leo Pereira, asked him to get on a call with us. He said, no problem. Let's schedule it right now. Here's 3 times. You know, our broker team. So if you're out there having some questions about leadership, training, any of those things, reach right out to the people that are in our leadership team. And I think you'd be very surprised to see the response that you get. So I hope this call was of value to you today. Thank you for all the questions. George, thank you for helping me facilitate this and the recordings and everything as well. It has been recorded, and I do have it in Workplace. So if you have someone that has not had a chance to listen to it and would like to, just send me an email and we can make that work. So anybody have anything they want to share of what they learned and, you know, what was great about the call?
So Tom, can I add something?
Sure can.
So what you just said to us about reaching out to people via workplace chat, you had asked us to do that to Leo, and so I did. He got back with me in less than 24 hours, and it was very apparent it wasn't answered by his assistant. It was answered by him.